So I'm changing hats. This morning, I was the closest you will ever come to a Jewish bubby, which is not very close. Okay. But you'll have matzo ball soup. And now I'm going to give the talk, change hats, and be a Buddhist looking at the very tragic situation that's going on in the Middle East. So I want to start actually with one email that somebody wrote. And he was saying that he very much benefits from my talks about global affairs and US politics. So seeing it through this lens helps me contextualize things and see it all from a much higher level. I find them hopeful, and they help me detach and expand and even relax with some of it. And I got an email from, can't say the name properly, Vyacheslav from Ukraine, who kind of echoed that sentiment, that it was very helpful to listen to a Dharma perspective on what's going on, not only between Russia and Ukraine, but between Israel and the Gaza. Okay, then I got also some other ones. One person wrote and was saying there's so much misinformation going on with what's happening in the Middle East and also in the US, because we still don't have a Speaker of the House. It's been 2 weeks. Yeah. And, it's becoming more and more difficult in our world to discern what to believe and what not to believe. Yeah. And this came up as a really big thing yesterday because there was a hospital in Gaza that was bombed, and horrific pictures of, people trying to get people who were sick out of the hospital, although they say that hundreds of those people who were in that hospital died because it was bombed. And and then just the chaos of new people who were wounded going to another hospital, trying to get in and getting their wounds taken care of. Just tremendous chaos. And what I was thinking about it, the headlines, that it was bombed and 100 people died. And the next thing after that was Hamas said it was Israel who bombed the hospital, and Israel said, no, it was some Hamas wayward rockets. Okay? So both of them said the other side did it. Okay? Typical of human beings, isn't it? Wouldn't it have been nice if the next headline was the world comes together and contributes supplies and money to build a new hospital, and in the meantime to evacuate the people who are injured and who are still alive and the newly wounded people. Wouldn't that have been nice as a headline? Yeah, but what do world leaders do? Not that. They just blame the other side. Okay, and we live in this world, so it's very easy to be angry at the leaders. It's very easy to be angry at the other side. Okay, so I also got some other emails. I'm not going to tell you about all of them, but one of them was from somebody, okay, who runs a training program in mindfulness and meditation at the Levinsky Wingate Academic Center. And their people had gone out and interviewed a lot of people who had been on October 7th, the day that the whole thing started, when the Hamas crossed into Israel and started killing people randomly and taking prisoners and so on. And over about 1,300 Israelis were killed on that day. Okay, so they went around, the people from this academic center, who and interviewed some of those people about their experiences. Yeah, and the interviews were, I watched them. I mean, they're really heart-wrenching when the people tell their experiences of either they had a rave and all the young people, and like 260 of them were mowed down, and people in their kibbutzim eating breakfast, and being interrupted, and the parents probably tortured in front of the children, and then their bodies piled up one on top of the other. And I mean, just they all told their stories about what happened. There's one Israeli soldier, a couple of soldiers who talked about what they saw when they went into the homes and so on. So at the end of one of them, I mean, this guy told his story, and like I said, it's heart-wrenching, but his last statement was, it's either us or them. Can't be both. It's us or them. Another person, when they finished their story, it was, Hamas, you're going to pay for this. Yeah, so most of the stories ended either with people sobbing, which is understandable, or with statements of anger and revenge. Because that's, when you don't have the Dharma, that's what happens. Yesterday, Venerable S.K. talked about grief, and grief is so much related to attachment. And when people in your family or your friends or even your country, are harmed, since there's attachment to I and mine, which are seen as inherently existent, then so much anguish when something happens to those people, So there's anguish, and then how do some people deal with anguish? They then flip to anger. Yeah, anger, hatred, revenge. And then the whole idea of we need justice. And you've probably heard me say before, I've never heard the word justice in Buddhist teachings. Yeah, and of course I haven't heard everything, but I've never heard the idea of justice. Yeah, it's if you harm others, you are also harming yourself. Others are harmed this life, you're planting the seeds for your own misery in the future lives. But there's nothing about justice, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Yeah, like Gandhi said, that would make everybody in the world blind and unable to chew their food. There's no idea of exacting from somebody else what you experience, doing it to them and them making them experience what you experienced plus some, and make it really awful. Yeah. And His Holiness, in the face of what happened in Tibet, yeah, and the genocide there, the environmental destruction there, His Holiness said, do not hate the communist Chinese. There's no iota of justice, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth justice, or revenge. And when some of the young Tibetans got a little antsy and they were thinking, maybe we should be violent, His Holiness cut it off. He said no. Yeah, even when people started doing self-immolation to protest what was being done, His Holiness said it's better to live for Tibet than to die for Tibet. So it's a whole different perspective. Buddhism has a whole different perspective on how to react when you're harmed, when you are harmed. It's very different than the Judaic Christian model, and Muslim model, which is founded on revenge and justice, which I don't know about justice. Anyway, all of this made me really think about this one verse. I think it's from the Dharmapada, I'm not sure, in which the Buddha said, hatred is not ceased by hatred, but only by love. And this is the eternal rule. And it's quite true, isn't it? We've been seeing, for example, between Israel and Hamas, every few years, not even few years, sometimes it's every year, Hamas throws some rockets, Israel does some bombing. Once in a while, I think it was 06 or 05, sometime, Israel, went in, occupied it, and then they gave up the occupation, turned it back over to the Palestinians. And then, every few years, this kind of thing. And this time, it was really horrific. It's kind of the worst, people are saying it's the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. And this is actually nothing compared to what happened in the Holocaust. But so people are so, the Palestinians are angry, the Israelis are angry, the leaders of both of these stir up the anger, because that's the way to get the people to follow them, and that gives them more power. Also, they are important. The people, trust their leaders at that point. So Bibi, who's been in a lot of trouble with the law in Israel, now he's leading it, and people are following him, because you've got to take refuge in whoever is the head of the country when you have a tragedy like this. Of course, some people are saying, will he make it, or because a lot of Israelis, there was no intelligence on this. And the Israeli intelligence services and their army is known as one of the world's best. And they completely spaced out on this. They had no idea this attack was going to happen. So some people are wondering politically what will happen with Bibi. So the whole thing, how do we relate to this? And when this one academic center, they sent me these interviews, and they say, how would you say something comforting to these people? And I wasn't sure what they were actually looking for me to say. I emailed one of my Israeli friends and asked, and she knew about those people and gave me some background, which was really helpful. Okay. So those people mean really well. They're talking about the anguish that the Israelis are feeling because of the attack. And that was the big thing that hit the news. And now the big thing that's hitting the news is the tragedy in Gaza from the Israelis bombing and preparing for a land invasion, which is going to be horrific. And of course, the Israelis who were killed by the Hamas terrorists, who have been training for a long time to do this, those are just regular civilians. When Israel retaliates, who are the main people getting killed? Regular civilians. So who are the people suffering the most? Not the leaders. Yeah, they're either in Hamas, they have miles and miles of tunnel underneath the Gaza Strip. They're safe. Israeli leaders, they're safe. But the common people are, on both sides, are suffering. Yeah. And what I find interesting and tragic is when you look at the pictures, sometimes you have to pause and say, are these pictures of Israelis who are injured, or are these pictures of Palestinians who are injured? Yeah. I mean, the terrorist Palestinian, the Hamas people wear a green band. Okay, you can see them. The Israeli soldiers, they wear their uniform. You know them. But in terms of the regular civilian population, okay, with the women, the Muslim women, some, but not all of them, have their long robe and their hair scarf. The Israeli women, the Orthodox women, also wear a headscarf. Okay, the Muslim headscarf is tied here. The Orthodox headscarf is often tied in the back. But you have to look closely. Which mother, sobbing mother, holding an injured child are you looking at? An Israeli one or a Palestinian one? Yeah. Which man sobbing because his son got killed? Is it a Palestinian man or is it an Israeli man? And so, as Buddhists, how do we react to this? Yeah. I think we really go back to the bodhicitta teachings, having equanimity, first of all, and not dividing it into friend, enemy, and stranger, which of course is what the rest of the world is doing. Yeah. But if we can really see, like, everybody in this situation is controlled by their afflictions and their karma. And how your afflictions manifest are going to depend upon which plot of dirt you are born on. Are you born on this plot of dirt or that plot of dirt? Okay, because this plot of dirt, you're going to side with one team, and this side of, if you're born on this one, you're going to side with the other. Yeah. And we don't know any of these people personally, do we? What is the use of our dividing them into friends and enemies, my side and your side? It's totally ridiculous. Yeah. Because if we take for ourselves, if we were born on this side, we would think like those people and be on that side. If we were born on this side, we would think like those people and side with that people. It's just the circumstances of where people are born, and then your afflictions manifest in terms of grief, in terms of hatred, in terms of revenge, according to the dirt that you were born on. So I think as Buddhists, or as people wanting to keep their sanity in all of this, I think we have to see it like that, that this is a tragedy for everybody. Okay. Now, some people are going to say, if I say that, they're going to say, what? You say that the Israelis should not retaliate after 1,300, 1,400 people were killed? And somebody else is going to say, what? You think Hamas, the Palestinians should not attack the Israelis, even though they're living in what looks very much like a ghetto? Yeah. So you're saying that neither side should be angry and retaliate and stick up for their own side? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Thich Nhat Hanh, when there was, during the Vietnam War, he refused to say, take sides. Both sides hated him. Isn't that interesting? You refuse to take sides, so both sides dislike you. And so people are going to say to me, well, what do you propose instead? You want to have a world conference and they come together? Actually, at this point of time, I don't think they're ready to have a world conference. Yeah, there's too much active affliction. Nobody can listen to anybody else at this moment. Yeah, both sides need to do their grieving. I have no good remedy for what's going on and how to make peace in the Middle East, because when you live in samsara with beings who are controlled by their afflictions and karma, you're not going to have peace. I mean, this is what samsara is and why we want to get out of it and why we cultivate bodhicitta, wanting to get both the people on both sides out of it, not just our side and their side or theirs, both sides, because we're not taking sides. We're thinking about suffering sentient beings, and doing our best in our practice so that we can say things and model things that might make people think a little bit. It has to start individually. You cannot legislate peace. You cannot legislate compassion. It has to be through people's individual practice and hearing the words and working on themselves. So, that's what we can contribute to it. And it's, there's not going to be some quick thing like that. When I was a kid, probably you too when you were a kid, I looked at what was going on in the world and saying, why can't people get along? What they're doing, they're just harming themselves and each other. And I was just looking at it in terms of this life. I didn't even know about karma at that time. Yeah. So I don't have any good idea for instant peace. Yeah. But I do know what won't work. Yeah. And hatred and retaliation and blame do not work. Yeah. Okay. So, so then some other people from Israel wrote me, and, we have, of course, our friends from Russia and Ukraine. And so, we, due to our karma right now, happen to be free of that kind of situation happening in our lives. But it could happen. Yeah, in this country, it could happen. But, or, we could be traveling somewhere and then being like the Palestinian Americans stuck in Gaza or the Israeli Americans stuck in Israel, everybody wanting to leave, but the powers that be won't open the border. Yeah, although this morning, they said that they agreed to open the border for aid to come into Gaza. Yeah, so this is what really makes sense. Yeah, the Israelis come, bomb the place, and then the rest of the world gathers aid and takes it in. Yeah, then after it calms down, then the Gazans rebuild their things. Yeah, they can't get the material over the entry points because those are closed, and when they're open, they're very well monitored. Yeah, so the Gazans, that's why they have these miles and miles of tunnels underneath their city. I mean, they do an incredible illegal business to get their materials in, because legally, very often they can't get stuff in because people are afraid that it will be used for war. So it's just totally crazy. So yeah, so there's been a lot of aid sitting at the Rafah border. This is the only one that is not controlled by Israel. It's the border with Egypt, between Gaza and Egypt. And it's so crazy. It's been how many days that the Palestinians, have been getting bombed, and Israel said at the beginning, we're cutting off water, food, fuel, so there'll be no electricity, and we're going to have a land invasion. I mean, they're talking, it's not clear what they really want, what the end picture, but they say they want to make it so Hamas can no longer survive. But, what happens to the ordinary people? Okay, so, yeah, it's such an example of how we act as our own worst enemy. Yeah, because when we retaliate, then people retaliate back to us. Yeah, and when we retaliate, then we're creating negative karma that we will experience the result of. Okay, so everybody loses in this kind of situation. We lose this life, we lose in future lives. And so that's why the Buddha said, hatred is never remedied by hatred, but only by love. And love, it doesn't mean you hug everybody and say, I love you. It means love, from a Buddhist viewpoint, means you wish people to have happiness and the causes of happiness. Yeah? Why is that so difficult? Well, because there's anger and there's ignorance. Okay, so we have our little merry-go-round of ignorance, attachment, and anger. So anyway, yeah, the point of this whole thing is not to despair, but to work on our own minds, and then when we are active with other people, try to say things and try to model things that show concern and love for other beings without taking sides. Yeah? And so if we can each do that in our own little sphere, then slowly something will happen.